My sister kicked me out of her wedding at her $28 million mansion, laughing that I couldn't afford it. The air at the entrance to the Blackwood Manor estate was different. It smelled of money, a crisp, clean fragrance of manicured lawns, salt from the nearby ocean, and the faint, expensive perfume of the guests gliding past me. I, Sloane Vance, 31 years old, stood before a stoic security guard who held a tablet like it was the 10 Commandments. "Name?" he asked, his eyes scanning me with bored professionalism. My simple but elegant navy dress and sensible heels clearly didn't scream, guest of honor. "Sloane Vance," I said, my voice steady. "I'm the bride's sister." He tapped the screen a few times, his brow furrowing slightly. He scrolled, then scrolled again. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, the apology as hollow as a drum. "Your name is not on the list." A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I forced a polite smile. "There must be a mistake. Can you check again?" "Sloane Vance." He didn't. He just shook his head. "No Vance by that first name. I can't let you in." My smile tightened. "Could I just call my sister? Her name is Amelia." He shrugged, a gesture that said, "It's your time you're wasting." I stepped aside, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled out my phone and dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up, the sound of music and laughter spilling through the receiver. "Sloane. What is it?" "I'm a little busy getting married," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine impatience. "Amelia, there's a problem at the gate. My name isn't on the guest list." A short, sharp laugh crackled through the phone. It was a sound I knew well, the sound of her amusement at my expense. "A mistake." "Oh, Sloane. You didn't actually think you were invited, did you?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What are you talking about?" "This is an A-list event," she sneered, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was louder than a shout. "We can't have peasants ruining the aesthetic. It was just easier this way." She hung up. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Peasants. The word echoed in the silent space between my heartbeats. A wave of humiliation, cold and sharp, washed over me. But as the first wave receded, something else rose in its place. Not anger. Not sadness. It was a terrifying, profound calm. The calm of a CEO about to liquidate a failing asset. She was right about one thing. There was no mistake. And she didn't know that while my name might not have been on her guest list, it was on the deed to the entire $28 million property. My family has always operated on a two-tiered system. There was Amelia, the golden child, and then there was me, the self-sufficient wallpaper. The disparity was never clearer than at our college graduations. I graduated at the top of my class, summa cum laude with a degree in finance and economics. My parents attended, of course. They gave me a hug, a Hallmark card with a generic "We're so proud of you" message, and a crisp $100 bill. For a celebratory dinner, my dad had said, already looking at his watch. They took a single, slightly blurry photo of me holding my diploma before announcing they had to leave to beat the traffic. 3 years later, it was Amelia's turn. She squeaked by with a C average in communications, a degree she'd chosen because it had the fewest math requirements. For her, there was no talk of beating traffic. They threw her a lavish party at a country club. They gifted her a brand new, pearl-white convertible. I can still remember the cloying smell of the new leather interior as she posed for what must have been 200 photos, flashing a brilliant smile, the setting sun glinting off the car's flawless finish. When I quietly asked my mother about the difference in celebration, she just patted my arm with a sigh, as if I were a child who didn't understand the complexities of the world. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice laced with a gentle pity that was worse than any insult. "Amelia needs a good head start in the real world. She needs the image, the confidence. You've always been so self-sufficient, Sloane. You always land on your feet. It wasn't a compliment. It was an abdication. It was their permission slip to focus all their resources, financial and emotional, on the daughter who was a black hole of need, while I, the one who quietly excelled, was expected to photosynthesize my own support. I didn't argue. I just smiled a thin smile and helped clean up the party afterwards. But that night, I went back to my tiny apartment, looked at my hard-won diploma, and made a vow. I would land on my feet, all right. I would build a world for myself so solid, so unshakable, that I would never, ever need them for anything. I would become so self-sufficient that they wouldn't even be able to comprehend the ground I stood on. About a year ago, the four of us, my parents, Amelia, and I, were having one of our rare family dinners. It was before she was engaged to Preston, but he was already in the picture. The entire evening was a performance, a showcase for Amelia's new, elevated life. She talked about designer brands I'd never heard of and vacation spots I'd only seen in magazines. Then she dropped the bomb. Her new boyfriend, Preston Dalton, wasn't just wealthy, he was a visionary real estate developer. He was heading a new, ultra-exclusive project, a collection of bespoke mansions on a private coastal bluff. And he was building their future home there, a sprawling, 15,000 square foot monument to their success, valued at an eye-watering $28 million. My parents were practically levitating with pride. "Oh, Amelia. A real estate developer," my mother gushed. Amelia preened, soaking in the attention. "And the best part," she continued, leaning forward as if sharing a state secret, "is that the entire project is funded by a single, silent investor. Preston says he's a ghost, a complete whale. Nobody knows who he is. They just operate under a company name, Elysian Ventures." I had just taken a sip of my Cabernet. The name hit me like a physical blow. Elysian Ventures. My company. The boutique investment firm I had built from the ground up, shielded by layers of attorneys and NDAs. The source of my quiet, invisible fortune. The wine went down the wrong pipe. I choked, a harsh, racking cough that made me double over. The conversation screeched to a halt. All eyes were on me. Not with concern, but with annoyance. "For God's sake, Sloane, can you be more careful?" Amelia snapped, her perfect moment ruined. "You're drawing attention." My father just slid the water glass closer to me, his expression grim. I spent the next 30 seconds coughing into my napkin, using the moment to hide the shock and wild, hysterical irony that was threatening to bubble out of me as laughter. They were fawning over a dream life that I, the embarrassing, clumsy older sister, was bankrolling. They were so blinded by the sparkle of their golden child they couldn't see the damn son sitting at the table with them. To my family, I was a predictable, slightly pitiable footnote. Sloane Vance, the quiet data analyst who worked from home. My life, as they saw it, was a portrait of beige. I lived in a modest but tidy 2-bedroom apartment in a decent, forgettable suburb. I drove a reliable 5-year-old Honda. I wore clothes from Taylor, not Chanel. It was a carefully constructed fortress of solitude, designed to be so utterly uninteresting that they would never bother to look closer. My real life happened in a different world. It happened on encrypted servers and in hushed conference calls with my attorney, Mr. Harrison. It happened in the silent, thrilling calculus of risk and reward. And it happened in the one place that was truly mine, my second bedroom, which I had converted into a bookbinding and restoration studio. That was my anchor. The world of finance was abstract, a dance of numbers on a screen. But in my studio, things were real. I loved the scent of old paper and leather, the satisfying heft of a brass press. I found a deep, meditative peace in the meticulous process of taking something broken, a book with a snapped spine, with torn, brittle pages, and making it whole again. With patience and the right tools, I could fix the tangible, the paper and glue. It was a quiet, constant reminder of a painful lesson I'd learned long ago: you can't restore people who are determined to be broken. You can only save the things that will let you. My Aunt Catherine was the only one who seemed to suspect the disconnect. She was my mom's younger sister, a retired librarian who lived 3 states away. She called me every few weeks. "I hear Amelia's wedding is going to be quite the affair," she'd said in our last call. "Are you really okay with all this, dear?" Her voice was gentle, but her question was sharp. She knew. She didn't know the details, but she knew the dynamics. "I'm fine, Aunt Catherine," I'd lied. And we both knew it was a lie. Before we continue with the story, if you're enjoying this so far, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And let me know what city you're watching from in the comments below. Every comment helps the story reach more people. Thank you so much. The months leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in passive aggression. I was, naturally, not asked to be a bridesmaid. "It's just my closest friends," Amelia had explained breezily, "you understand. We're not that close." I was excluded from the family group chat dedicated to wedding planning, so I only heard second-hand details from my mother about the 10-tier cake, the designer gown flown in from Italy, and the orchids being imported from Hawaii. My attempts to participate were met with a wall of polite, dismissive silence. I texted Amelia a month before the wedding. "Hi. So excited for the big day. Is there a dress code I should know about? Or a color scheme?" I watched the 3 little dots appear and then disappear. The message status changed to "read." And then, nothing. No reply. 4 days. Instead of a reply, her answer came 3 hours later, broadcast to her 5,000 Instagram followers. She posted a selfie with 2 of her bridesmaids, champagne flutes in hand. The caption read, "So blessed that our wedding will be filled with people who reflect our vibe. Quality over quantity. So important to surround yourself with positive, successful people on your special day. Hashtag high class, hashtag no bad energy, hashtag vibes." It was a digital slap in the face, delivered with a sparkling emoji. She couldn't give me the courtesy of a 1-sentence text message, but she could find the time to publicly declare me bad energy. It was then that a small, cold part of me started to suspect I wouldn't be getting an invitation. But hope, as they say, is a stubborn weed. I told myself she was just stressed. I told myself family was family. I bought a new dress anyway. A lovely, understated navy blue sheath. I bought a tasteful, expensive crystal vase for their wedding gift. I held on to the fiction that my presence, however peripheral, was still expected. That I, on some basic level, still belonged. It was a fiction I was about to see go up in flames. Sitting in my Honda in a visitor parking spot just down the road from the estate, the engine off, the silence in the car was absolute. The word peasant hung in the air, a toxic, shimmering vapor. My phone was dark in my lap. The last thread had snapped. For my entire life, I had been playing a long game. I had tolerated the slights, the dismissals, the blatant favoritism. I had absorbed it all, turning their low expectations into fuel for my high ambitions. I thought that one day, I would be successful enough, stable enough, something enough, and they would finally see me. Not as the boring, self-sufficient daughter, but as me. Sloane. What a fool I'd been. I saw it with stunning, painful clarity. There was no finish line to cross that would win their approval. To them, my worth was fixed. I was the drab, gray background against which Amelia's glitter could truly shine. My role was to be less, so she could be more. Tears did not come. Rage did not come. What came was a profound and unsettling peace. It was the grief of finally, truly letting go. It was the acceptance that the family I had spent my life trying to earn the love of simply didn't exist. It was over. My hands were perfectly steady as I picked up my phone. I didn't scroll through social media. I didn't call Aunt Catherine to cry. I opened Signal, my encrypted messaging app, and navigated to my conversation with Mr. Harrison, my attorney. There was a draft message I'd written 6 months ago, after the dinner party where I'd first heard the name of my own company from Preston's arrogant lips. It was a contingency plan. A break glass in case of emergency measure. My thumb hovered over the send button for a single, heavy heartbeat. I thought of the new car. I thought of the Instagram post. I thought of the word peasant. Then I pressed send. The message contained only 2 words, execute protocol. I then explained to Mr. Harrison that the protocol was a set of legal instructions, drafted and notarized months ago. It authorized him to immediately and without further consultation file the necessary documents to terminate all funding and begin asset seizure related to all entities under Preston Dalton, citing a breach of the personal and professional conduct clause I had buried deep in the labyrinthine funding contract. It was a kill switch. And I had just flipped it. My first stop was not home. I drove to a 24-hour Kinko's in the next town over, a place where no one knew me. The air smelled of toner and cheap paper. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I logged into a public computer, accessed a secure cloud drive, and printed a single sheet of paper. It was the cover page of the official legal filing. At the top, in bold, imposing letters, it read, Notice of immediate asset liquidation and funding termination. Below that was the list of affected entities, Preston's LLCs, his development corporations, all of it. And in the top right corner was the letterhead logo, a stylized EV inside a clean, elegant circle. Elysian Ventures. My next stop was a papyrus store. I bought a simple, heavy stock white gift box and a spool of silver satin ribbon. The clerk asked if it was for the wedding down at the manor. I just smiled and said it was for a special occasion. Back in my car, I carefully folded the document and placed it inside the box. I tied the ribbon into a perfect bow. It looked tasteful, elegant, and completely harmless. A Trojan horse made of paper and cardboard. I drove back toward the estate, parking a quarter-mile away. I pulled out my phone and opened a courier app. I entered the delivery address as Wedding Gift Table, Blackwood Manor, and the recipient as Amelia and Preston. In the instructions for the driver, I wrote, Please place on gift table. From Sloan. Cash tip upon confirmation. A few minutes later, a young man on a scooter pulled up. I handed him the box and a $50 bill. Make sure it gets on that table, I said. He nodded, zipped it into his thermal bag, and sped off toward the grand entrance I had been turned away from less than an hour before. As I watched him go, I felt nothing. Just the quiet, efficient hum of machinery set in motion. The gift had been sent. The bomb was on the table. I went home. The silence of my apartment felt different now. It wasn't lonely, it was serene. It was the eye of the storm. I walked into my bookbinding studio, the scent of leather and old glue a comforting balm. I picked up the project I'd been working on, a first edition of The Count of Monte Cristo, its spine cracked and its pages threatening to fall away. A story about a long, patient, and meticulously planned revenge. The irony was not lost on me. I put my phone on the workbench, face down, on silent mode. I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to feel it. And then it began. A soft vibration. Then another. The screen lit up from the side, casting a faint blue glow. A text message. Then another. The vibrations started coming faster, like a frantic, irregular heartbeat. Buzz. Buzz. Bzzzzzzzzzzz. The screen became a strobe light. A call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. A call from my father. Ignored. A flurry of texts from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't need to read them. I knew what they said. With steady hands, I threaded a needle with thick linen cord. I began the patient work of stitching the book's signatures back together, one by one. I focused on the pull of the thread, the precise entry and exit of the needle. In my studio, I was creating order from chaos. Outside, in their world, I was doing the exact opposite. The vibrations became a constant, desperate tremor on the workbench. The storm had made landfall. I didn't learn the full story of the detonation until later that night, when I finally allowed myself to listen to the barrage of frantic, overlapping voicemails. It was like piecing together a plane crash from the black box recordings. The most vivid account came from my cousin Sarah, her voice a breathless, gossipy whisper. "Sloan, oh my God, you will not believe what just happened," her message began. Okay, so Amelia and Preston were about to cut the cake. Everyone was gathered around. And Amelia, you know how she is, she spots this one simple white box on the gift table. She announces to everyone, "Oh, this must be from my sister. Probably a toaster." And she laughs. Everyone laughs. Sarah's voice trembled with excitement. So she opens it, right there in front of everyone. She pulls out this single piece of paper and just looks at it, totally confused. She's like, "What is this, a joke?" But then Preston looks over her shoulder at it. And Sloan, his face. It was like he'd seen a ghost. All the blood just, gone. There was a pause in the message, filled with the muffled sound of panicked chatter. He snatches the paper from her. He's staring at it, and he starts muttering, "No, no, no." Amelia is getting pissed, saying, "Preston, what is wrong with you?" And he just points at the top of the paper, his hand is shaking, and he whispers, That's my investor's letterhead." Amelia still doesn't get it. She's like, "So?" Sloan works in data entry, she probably just printed it off the internet to be weird. And then Preston, oh my God, Sloan, he looks at her, and his voice is just a croak, and he says, "Amelia, her name is Sloan Vance. The company is called Elysian Ventures. Don't you get it?" The dominoes, it seemed, fell fast after that. As Preston was having his meltdown, his phone rang. According to a voicemail from my uncle, it was American Express, informing him that the corporate account had been frozen due to a recall of funds by the primary guarantor. The $10,000 charge for the Champagne Tower had just been declined. The final blow, described gleefully by Sarah, was the arrival of the venue manager, flanked by two imposing security guards. He walked straight up to the bride and groom, holding a tablet. "Mr. Dalton," he said, his voice cold and loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We have just received a legally binding email from the property's sole owner, a firm called Elysian Ventures. They have informed us that this event is unauthorized, constitutes trespassing, and that all services are to be terminated immediately." The chaos that followed was pure pandemonium, a symphony of destruction played out in panicked voicemails. The music, a string quartet playing Vivaldi, screeched to an abrupt halt. The confused murmurs of 500 wealthy guests quickly swelled into a roar of gossip and speculation. I could hear it all. The caterers began packing up the untouched food. The bartenders started putting caps back on the bottles of top-shelf liquor. My cousin described Amelia grabbing the venue manager's arm, screaming, "This is my wedding. You can't do this." He had simply peeled her fingers off his sleeve and said, "Ma'am, I'm following the orders of the person who owns the ground you're standing on." The most telling message was from my father. It wasn't angry. It was just, bewildered. "Sloan, what is happening? The lights are literally being turned off. People are leaving. Preston is just standing there, white as a sheet, not saying a word. Amelia is, she's on the floor. She's actually on the floor, weeping. Please, call me. I don't understand. But I understood perfectly. Their perfect, curated illusion of a life, built on a foundation of my money and their disdain for me, had just been publicly and spectacularly demolished. They hadn't just lost a party. They had lost their entire reality, right in front of everyone they had ever wanted to impress. And the architect of their ruin was the one person they never, ever saw coming. Later that night, long after the last vibration had ceased, I poured myself a healthy measure of Lagavulin 16. The peaty smoke of the scotch was a fitting companion to the smoldering ruins I had created. I sat on my comfortable, non-designer couch and finally, with a sense of clinical detachment, began to sift through the digital wreckage. 57 missed calls. Over 100 text messages. 34 voicemails. I listened to a few, like an anthropologist studying the dialects of a lost tribe. The emotional arc was fascinatingly predictable. My mother's voicemails were a masterclass in emotional whiplash. The first one was pure, undiluted rage. Sloane Elizabeth Vance, what have you done? You have humiliated us. You have ruined your sister's life. You are a monster. The last one, left 2 hours later, was a thin, wheedling plea. Sloane, honey, it's Mommy. Please, just call us back. I'm sure this is all a big misunderstanding. We can fix this. Whatever it is, we can fix it. We love you. We love you. The words felt like counterfeit currency. Amelia's were even better. They started as a string of incoherent, profanity-laced tirades. Then they devolved into sobbing, hiccuping messages that were mostly just my name, repeated over and over like a desperate prayer. Sloane, please, why? Sloane. The power dynamic, the one that had defined my entire existence, had not just been shifted, it had been inverted, shattered, and remade. For 31 years, I was the one who was invisible, the one trying to get their attention. Now, they were screaming into a void, desperate for a sign, any sign, that I was listening. I took another sip of scotch. The silence from my end was the loudest sound in the world. A week later, I agreed to meet them. Not at their home, which was no longer theirs, and not at mine. We met at a sterile, anonymous coffee shop halfway between us, a place with no memories. They looked like refugees. My father's face was etched with new lines, my mother's eyes were puffy and red-rimmed. Amelia looked like a ghost, hollowed out and fragile, all her brilliant shine gone. They tried to talk, to explain, to justify. My mother prattled on about the stress of the wedding, how Amelia didn't mean it. My father mumbled something about just wanting his girls to be happy. I let them talk, sipping my black coffee, offering nothing. Finally, Amelia spoke, her voice a raw whisper. Why, Sloane? Tears welled in her eyes, real tears of pain and confusion. I didn't want you there. It was my day. Why would you do all this? Why would you ruin my life? I put my cup down, the soft click of ceramic on saucer the only sound at the table. I looked her dead in the eye, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no pain. Just the quiet finality of a closed ledger. My voice was level, calm, and devoid of heat. You said peasants weren't welcome at your party, Amelia. You were right. I let the words hang in the air for a moment. You were just mistaken about who the peasant was, and who owned the castle. You threw your party in my house, with my money, and then tried to have me thrown out. I simply took my castle back. I paused, then delivered the final sentence. I suggest you get used to life outside the walls. I stood up, pulling a $20 bill from my wallet and placing it on the table to cover my coffee. I walked out of the coffee shop without a backward glance, leaving them sitting in the ruins of the world they thought they had built. As I drove home, I didn't feel the triumphant joy of a victor. I felt a profound, quiet relief. It was the relief of finally closing a heavy, painful book that I had been forced to read my entire life, knowing the ending was always going to be the same. Except this time, I had finally been allowed to write a new, final chapter. I had lost a family, but I had regained myself. They built their dream on my back and then tried to kick me away when they thought they'd reached the top. I just took my foundation back. My family will paint me as the villain of this story for the rest of their lives. So, Reddit, I'll ask you. Am I the asshole? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for listening.